Welcome to The Way of Effortlessness Part 5. Intellectually knowing about trust and oneness misses the essence of the experience, because these two are both dissected as relative aspects of an absolute reality. The union with the Tao is only known as a living reality when the so-called relative aspects have dissolved into their original oneness. The sense of unity that we seek to discover can never be something that we could theorize or speculate upon. As I have mentioned, the very use of language itself is isolated to the field of duality, so all the investigations of religion, philosophy, and science are futile if they ignore consciousness in giving preference to intellectual study. The Eastern wisdom traditions, especially Taoism and Zen Buddhism, seek to eradicate any such intellectual debate or speculation, because they know that a trust in self and life leads to the unexplainable peace of oneness. A Chinese Zen master of the 9th century, Taoist and Zen, was once asked, "What is the Buddha?" And he spontaneously answered, 3 pounds of flax. Many philosophical debates have been hatched about the meaning of this reply but fall short of the mark. From the Zen perspective, Taoist was bringing the questioner into the reality of the now moment. The irrational answer of 3 pounds of flax extinguishes any idea of intellectual theorizing and speculation, which is the sole purpose of any great Zen koan. A koan is a story, dialogue, statement, and ultimately a riddle, which is used in Zen practice to provoke great doubt in the student's mind as a way of testing his progress. One of the oldest koans can be found in the Chuang-Tzu text, and this is why some scholars believe Zen Buddhism is a tradition built in part on Chuang-Tzu's wisdom. In this passage, he uses complete nonsense to puzzle our intellectual faculties so that we stand back in awe and are brought back to the ground of the irrational impartiality of life. There is a beginning. There is a not yet beginning to be a beginning. There is a not yet beginning to be a not yet beginning to be a beginning. There is being. There is not-being. There is a not yet beginning to be not-being. There is a not yet beginning to be a not yet beginning to be not-being. Suddenly there is not-being. Wow! Trying to make sense of such a passage is impossible, and that's precisely the point. Actually, Chuang-Tzu is using humor in this passage, because even in his day people tried to use logic to understand the meaning of the universe and our existence, only to arrive at erroneous conclusions. Koans are famously employed by Zen masters to throw disciples back into the present moment, where process has no beginning or end because thinking has completely succumbed to the irrational. One such encounter with a koan is described in a story in which a disciple was summoned to the Zen master's home. The master told the disciple that he wanted an exhibition of Zen tomorrow. Leaving the master's quarters, the disciple was confused about how he could put together such an exhibition. That whole night he tossed and turned in bed, anxious about how to please the master. The next day, on the way to the master's home, the disciple was still fretting about the problem when he saw a frog that is unique to Japan. Aha! He thought, and he took the frog to the master's house. When he arrived, the master asked, "So can you exhibit Zen to me?" In reply, the disciple showed him the frog. The master gave a slight smirk and said, "No, too intellectual." In other words, his exhibition was too contrived, too well thought out. The very thinking about it thwarted the project. To answer the master somewhat authentically in this regard requires no thinking, as Zen is the natural spontaneity of the universe and the eternal now. So to exhibit Zen is not to worry about it, because Zen is life. When we try to give a logical, intellectual explanation to such a reality as trust, we lose sight of its significance in our own experience. Many masters past and present, such as Taoist and Zen and Chuang-Tzu, have had no time for philosophical debate about the reality of Tao. They would rather give you a direct experience of it so you can taste it for yourself. When we step outside of all the learning we cling to, we come back into that sense of unity. It is the individual's choice whether or not to live Wu Wei, as this depends on no external source. To retreat from external compulsion is a gesture in favor of trust, because no outside source of learning can take away your innate connection to the universe. The peace that resides in the unity of trust allows the individual to harmonize with the world. This not only brings the light of Tao into the world but also guides and helps the individual along their journey through life. When we trust, the universe answers us through the resonance of our experience. The feeling of oneness brings the individual back into accord with the function of the universe, like a child nourished by its mother's bosom. When we trust completely, our physical, mental, and spiritual planes of consciousness harmonize with the heartbeat of the earth. When we have cleared the passage for Tao to function through us with its natural velocity, the rhythms of our bodily functions and vibrations of our mental states move as an extension of the earth. A perfect example of this complete trust and harmony with the planet is the Kon-Tiki expedition of Norwegian ethnographer and adventurer Thor Heyerdahl. In this amazing story, Heyerdahl and his crew drifted on a balsa wood raft from Peru out into the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. From a logical perspective, this attempt to just drift into the vastness of the Pacific would appear suicidal. But somehow, in true Taoist wisdom, Heyerdahl had a trust that his own organism and the ecosystem of the Pacific would harmonize together as one if they were given the time to do so. Without exercising the use of force, Heyerdahl's trust that he and the ocean were a unified system allowed the power of Ti to manifest. As he and his crew drifted into the unknown, the balsa wood of the raft began to swell up and bind the logs together more securely, which gave their raft the durability to take on the tough conditions of the Pacific Ocean. The issue of food was another obstacle to overcome. Yet astonishingly, as a result of their complete trust, flying fish were on their deck every morning. Rejecting the fear of the unknown, Heyerdahl and his crew began to replicate the intelligence of dolphins because they were in perfect harmony with the course of nature by following the path of least resistance. The trust in following the path of least resistance is the power of Ti, which is a reflection of how the power of lightning follows the path of least resistance, and also of how the Tao works through an empty mind. A full mind is resistant. In the Kon-Tiki adventure, Heyerdahl's trust was answered by what we would deem miraculous events. Yet from the wisdom of sages like Lao Tzu, these events would make perfect sense, because our organism is an intrinsic part of nature. Astonishingly, as Heyerdahl continued to follow the ocean's natural rhythms, he and his crew drifted, kilometers from Peru all the way to the distant islands of the Tuamotus of French Polynesia in the South Pacific. Heyerdahl's trust made him an aperture through which the universe could express its nature. His trust, though it may appear extreme, was the feeling of unity he had within by living Wu-Wei sincerely. In denying the use of force, Heyerdahl demonstrates how the power of Ti can change the world without any intention of doing so. When we oppose our own experience and try to control life, we develop an unnecessary anxiety within ourselves, because we fear the uncertainty of the future. We attempt to dictate to the future through our plans, and though these plans may be good in theory, they are in reality phantoms and distractions from the unity that can be found in trust. Thor Heyerdahl is an example of what each and every one of us can live by if we are radical enough to throw off our fears of the past and future, and instead live completely in the here and now.